The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I made my way down the empty corridor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. It was 2:37 a.m., the dead of night at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, and I was halfway through another uneventful graveyard shift. My name is Anthony Morelli, born and raised in South Philly, and for the past 2 years, I've been working as a night security guard at this sprawling complex of scientific marvels. It wasn't exactly the career I'd dreamed of as a kid, staring up at the stars from our cramped row home, but it was as close to space exploration as a guy like me was likely to get. I rounded the corner, my hand reflexively brushing against the taser on my belt. Not that I'd ever needed to use it. Most nights, my only company was the hum of sophisticated machinery and the occasional sleep-deprived scientist stumbling to the break room for another cup of coffee. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of unease I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to lengthen as I passed, or the faint whisper of sound just at the edge of hearing. Whatever it was, it had my nerves on edge. I paused at the junction of two hallways, my eyes drawn to a door I'd passed 100 times before. Unlike every other door in the facility, this one was unmarked. No room number, no nameplate, nothing to indicate its purpose. Just a featureless expanse of titanium with a high-tech biometric lock. I'd always wondered what was behind that door. In my first week on the job, I'd asked my supervisor, Frank Cianfrani, about it. The old-timer had just grunted and changed the subject, his weathered face creasing into a frown. I didn't bring it up again, but my curiosity never faded. As I stood there, contemplating the mystery for the umpteenth time, a sound broke the silence. A scream, muffled but unmistakable, coming from behind that very door. My heart raced as I rushed forward, pounding my fist against the unyielding metal. "This is security," I shouted. "Is anyone in there? Do you need help?" Silence. Then, just as I was about to call it in, another scream, this one clearer, filled with a terror that made my blood run cold. I fumbled for my radio, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. "Control, this is Morelli. We've got a situation in Sector 7, unmarked room, possible distress, requesting backup and medical support." Static crackled for a moment before a voice responded. It wasn't the usual night dispatcher, but Director Salvatore himself. His tone was clipped, professional, but I could hear an undercurrent of, was that fear? "Stand down, Officer Morelli. That area is restricted. Return to your regular patrol immediately." I hesitated, my sense of duty warring with the clear order. "Sir, I heard screams. Someone could be hurt." "That's an order, Morelli," Salvatore interrupted. "Forget what you heard. For your own good, walk away. Now." The radio went dead. I stood there, conflicted, staring at the impassive door. Another scream, fainter this time, made the decision for me. I couldn't just walk away. I pulled out my phone, dialing the number for Tom Esposito, one of the surveillance techs I'd befriended over countless early morning coffee runs. It rang twice before his groggy voice answered. "Anthony? It's the middle of the night, man. Tom, I need your help." I cut him off, explaining the situation in hurried whispers. "I know you've got access to the security feeds. Can you check the cameras near that door? See if there's anything unusual?" There was a long pause, then a sigh. "All right, give me a minute." I heard the clatter of keys, then a sharp intake of breath. "What the hell?" "What is it?" I pressed. "The feed. It's looped. Same 10 seconds of empty hallway over and over. Someone's tampered with it." My mind raced. This was bigger than I'd thought. "Tom, I need to get through that door. Is there any way you can override the lock?" Another pause, longer this time. When Tom spoke again, his voice was tight with fear. "Anthony, listen to me. Whatever's going on, it's way above our pay grade. Just walk away, man. It's not worth it." But I couldn't. Not now. Not after what I'd heard. "Please, Tom. I can't just ignore this. Someone could be in real trouble." A heavy sigh. Fuck. All right. I can probably spoof the biometrics. But Anthony, I'm serious. Be careful. And if anyone asks, you never talk to me. "Got it. Thanks, Tom, I owe you one. 5 minutes later, I was back at the door, a small device Tom had talked me through assembling clutched in my sweaty palm. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, then pressed it against the lock. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft beep and a hiss of hydraulics, the door slid open. The smell hit me first, antiseptic, with an underlying metallic tang that made my stomach churn. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I saw banks of computers, their screens flickering with streams of incomprehensible data. Strange machines hummed and pulsed, their purpose a mystery. But it was what lay in the center of the room that made my blood run cold. An operating table bathed in harsh blue light, and strapped to it, something that defied description. Vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways that sent shivers down my spine. Its limbs were too long, too jointed. Its skin a pale, luminescent grey that seemed to shift and ripple. And its face. God, its face. Where a mouth should have been was a writhing mass of tentacles. And its eyes, dozens of them, in colours I'd never seen before, all fixed on me with an alien intelligence that made my skin crawl. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of hallucination, a nightmare brought on by too many late nights and bad coffee. But then it moved. A twitch, a ripple of impossible musculature, and a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a scream, filled the air. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, a cacophony of impossible frequencies that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I clapped my hands over my ears, fighting the urge to run, and that's when I saw them. 3 figures in hazmat suits, huddled around a bank of monitors. They turned as one, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. "Who the hell are you?" one of them demanded, voice distorted by their suit speaker. "How did you get in here?" I opened my mouth to respond, to explain, but no words came out. My eyes were drawn back to the creature on the table. As I watched, horrified, one of its tentacles began to elongate, stretching towards me with unnatural speed. "Shit! Containment breach!" another of the suited figures shouted. They lunged for a panel on the wall, slamming their hand down on a large red button. Alarms blared. Red lights began to strobe, and the creature changed. Its form seemed to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was bending around it. The tentacle reaching for me split, then split again, a fractal pattern of writhing flesh. I turned to run, but the door had sealed shut behind me. I was trapped. "What is that thing?" I shouted over the din of the alarms. "What the fuck is going on here?" The lead scientist, at least I assumed they were a scientist, stepped towards me. "You shouldn't be here," they said, their voice tight with fear. And was that awe? "You have no idea what you've stumbled into." Before I could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down!" Everyone, hands where I can see them. I turned to see Director Salvatore striding into the room, flanked by armed security. His face was a mask of cold fury as he surveyed the scene. "Sir," I began, "I can explain." "Save it, Morelli," he snapped. "You have no idea what you've done." He turned to the security team. "Lock this place down. No one in or out without my express authorization. And get that thing under control." As the guards moved to comply, Salvatore grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "You're coming with me. We have a lot to discuss." He practically dragged me from the room, the creature's otherworldly screams fading behind us. We wound through a maze of corridors I'd never seen before, descending deeper into the bowels of the facility. Finally, we reached a small, windowless office. Salvatore shoved me into a chair, then collapsed into his own behind the desk. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Do you have any idea," he said at last, his voice low and dangerous, "what you've just compromised? Years of work, the most important discovery in human history, and you just waltz in there like it's a goddamn open house." "I heard screams," I said, my voice shaking. "I thought someone was in trouble. What was that thing?" Salvatore sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-odd years. "That thing, as you so eloquently put it, is the key to humanity's future. or its destruction. We're still not quite sure which. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. 3 years ago, a meteor crashed in the New Mexico desert. It should have burned up in our atmosphere, but it didn't. When we got to the crash site, we found him, the visitor, we call it, and it was communicating, broadcasting a signal into deep space. I listened, stunned, as Salvatore laid out a truth stranger than any science fiction. The creature wasn't just alien. It was from somewhere beyond our universe, a place where the laws of physics as we know them didn't apply. The signal it's sending, he continued, we think it's a beacon, a call to others of its kind. And if they come, he trailed off, shaking his head. So what are you going to do? I asked. Kill it? Salvatore laughed, but there was no humor in it. Kill it? We've tried. Bullets, poison, even a small nuclear device. Nothing affects it. No, we can't kill it. But we can't let it complete its message either. So we keep it sedated, studying it, trying to find a way to stop whatever's coming. He fixed me with a hard stare. And now you know. Which leaves me with a problem. What am I going to do with you, Mr. Morelli? My mouth went dry. Sir, I swear I won't tell anyone. I'll forget everything I saw, just... Please. Salvatore was silent for a long moment, considering. Then he nodded. All right, you'll be reassigned, of course, transferred to our Alaska facility, remote, isolated, where you can't cause any more trouble. I sagged with relief. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than the alternatives my imagination had conjured. Thank you, sir. A klaxon cut me off, so loud it made my teeth rattle. Salvatore's face went pale. No, he whispered. It can't be. He lunged for his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. I caught glimpses of security feeds, flashing warning signs. And then, the screens went dark. All of them, simultaneously. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then every monitor in the room blazed to life, filled with a whirling vortex of impossible colors. And a voice, not heard, but felt, reverberating in the depths of my soul. We are coming. Salvatore stumbled back from the desk, his face a mask of terror. It's too late, he whispered. God help us all. The floor began to tremble beneath our feet. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging us into darkness, broken only by the eerie glow of the screens. And in that moment, as the world seemed to come apart around us, I understood. The visitor hadn't been trapped here. It had been waiting, gathering strength, and now it was free. I don't remember much of what happened next. Flashes of chaos, screams, the shattering of reality itself as something vast and incomprehensible tore its way into our world. I came to in a field miles from the facility, my head pounding, my clothes singed and torn. In the distance, I could see a pillar of unearthly light stretching into the sky, writhing with shapes that hurt to look at. I ran. I've been running ever since. I set down my pen, my hand cramping from hours of furious writing. The dingy motel room around me was littered with crumpled papers, discarded coffee cups, and printouts of news articles and scientific journals. My walls were covered in hastily scrawled notes and diagrams, an attempt to make sense of the insensible. A glance at the grimy window showed the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon. Another sleepless night. But sleep brought only nightmares, visions of vast alien cityscapes and the screams of a dying universe. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. I had to keep going, had to get the word out somehow. But who would believe me? A washed-up security guard with a story too fantastic for even the tabloids. A soft knock at the door made me jump, my hand instinctively reaching for the gun I'd bought on the black market. Amazing what you can get with a NASA paycheck and a healthy dose of paranoia. Room service, a muffled voice called. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything. Slowly, carefully, I approached the door, gun at the ready. I didn't order room service, I called back. A pause. Then, Anthony? It's me, Sophia. My breath caught in my throat. Sophia Esposito, the IT specialist I'd been seeing before. Everything. The one person I'd tried to contact after I ran, hoping she might believe me. But her number had been disconnected, her apartment emptied. I hesitated, torn between hope and suspicion. It could be a trap, but if it was really her... Slowly, I opened the door. Sophia stood there looking exhausted and scared, but alive. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by concern. "Sophia, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" She pushed past me into the room, quickly shutting the door behind her. "It wasn't easy. I've been tracking you for weeks. Anthony, we don't have much time. They're coming." "Who? NASA? The government?" She shook her head, her eyes wild. "No, them. The ones the visitor called. I've seen them, Anthony. In the data streams, hidden in the noise. They're close. So close." I felt a chill run down my spine. How do you know all this?" Sophia's laugh was tinged with hysteria. "You think you're the only one who saw something they shouldn't. I was there that night too, monitoring the networks. I saw God. Anthony, the things I saw." She trailed off, her gaze distant. Then, with visible effort, she focused on me again. "But that's not important now. What matters is that we have a chance to stop this, to close the door before they can fully cross over." Hope, fragile and dangerous, bloomed in my chest. "How?" Sophia pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "This contains everything. All the data on the visitor, on the signal it was broadcasting, and on the anomalies we've been detecting since its escape. But more importantly, it has the key to stopping them." I took the drive, turning it over in my hands. Such a small thing to hold the fate of our world. "What do we do with it?" "There's a facility," Sophia explained, her words coming fast and urgent. "A backup site NASA built in case of, well, this. It houses a device designed to counteract the visitor's signal, to close the breach before it fully opens." "And this will tell us how to operate it?" I asked, holding up the drive. Sophia nodded. "That, and how to find the place. It's not on any official records. We need to..." She cut off suddenly, her head snapping towards the window. I followed her gaze but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just the parking lot, bathed in the grey light of dawn. "Sophia, what is it?" "We need to go," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Now." As if on cue, I heard it. A low, pulsing hum, just at the edge of hearing. It made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The same sound I'd heard that night in the lab. "Shit," I muttered, shoving the flash drive into my pocket and grabbing my go bag. How did they find us? Sophia was already at the door, peering out. "They didn't. Not exactly. They're everywhere now, Anthony, slipping through the cracks in reality. We just need to stay ahead of them." We made it to my beat-up Chevy just as the humming intensified. In the rearview mirror, I saw something impossible. The air behind us seemed to ripple and tear, revealing glimpses of a realm that hurt to look at. And emerging from that tear, I gunned the engine, tires squealing as we peeled out of the parking lot. In the passenger seat, Sophia was furiously tapping at her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked, swerving to avoid a delivery truck that had suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. Its driver was standing next to it, staring up at the sky with a blank expression. "Plotting our route," Sophia replied, not looking up. "The facility is in the Appalachians, about 6 hours from here if we push it." I nodded, focusing on the road ahead. All around us, signs of the incursion were becoming more apparent. Flocks of birds wheeled in impossible patterns overhead. Plants along the roadside writhed and twisted, taking on alien forms. And the people. Some, like the truck driver, seemed catatonic. Others moved with jerky, unnatural motions as if they were puppets controlled by unseen strings. And a few were changing, transforming into things that made my mind recoil. "Jesus," I muttered. "It's happening so fast. How long do we have?" Sophia's voice was grim. "Hours, maybe. The breach is widening exponentially. If we don't close it soon. She didn't need to finish the thought. I pressed down harder on the accelerator, pushing the old car to its limits. The hours that followed were a nightmare blur of escalating chaos. We sped through towns where reality itself seemed to be unraveling. Buildings twisted into non-Euclidean shapes, streets rippled like water, and always that maddening hum growing louder with each passing mile. We had to abandon the car eventually, when the roads became too warped to drive on. The last leg of our journey was on foot, scrambling through forests that pulsed with alien life. Finally, as the sun was setting, though it looked nothing like any sunset I'd ever seen, we crested a hill and saw it. A bunker, half buried in the mountainside, its entrance sealed with a massive steel door. "That's it," Sophia said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "The firewall, our last hope." We approached cautiously, wary of any defenders, but the place seemed deserted. Sophia pulled out her phone, using it to interface with the door's security system. After a tense minute, there was a series of heavy clunks, and the door began to swing open. The interior was dark, lit only by the dim glow of emergency lighting. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens dark, and in the center of the room, a massive device that looked like a cross between a satellite dish and a particle accelerator. "The nullifier," Sophia explained, moving to one of the computer terminals. "It's designed to generate a signal that will cancel out the visitor's beacon, close the breach and cut off the invasion." I watched as she worked, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Screens came to life, displaying streams of data I couldn't begin to understand. Outside, the alien hum had risen to a deafening roar. "How long?" I shouted over the noise. 10 minutes to power up," Sophia called back. "Then we can activate it." Those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. The bunker shook around us as reality itself seemed to tear at the seams. Through the open door, I could see the sky rippling with colors that shouldn't exist, punctuated by flashes of geometric shapes that hurt to look at. And then, just as the nullifier hummed to life, I saw them. 3 figures, silhouetted in the doorway. For a moment, I thought they were human. But as they stepped into the light, I realized how wrong I was. They moved with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Their bodies seemed to shift and flow, never quite settling on a single form. And their faces... God, their faces were a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, just like the visitor. "Sophia!" I yelled, raising my gun. But I knew deep down that it would be useless against these beings. She looked up from the console, her eyes widening in terror. "No," she whispered. "We're so close." The creatures advanced, their movements oddly graceful despite their alien nature. I fired, the gunshots deafeningly loud in the confined space. The bullets seemed to pass right through them as if they were made of smoke. One of them reached for me, its limb elongating impossibly. I felt a jolt of cold terror as it brushed my skin, and suddenly my mind was flooded with visions. Vast cities of non-Euclidean geometry, beings of pure energy locked in eternal dance, the death and rebirth of entire universes. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer cosmic scale of what I was witnessing. Through the haze of visions, I heard Sophia scream, "Anthony, the switch! Flip the switch!" With monumental effort, I forced my eyes to focus. The main console was just a few feet away. On it, a large red lever, the final trigger for the nullifier. I lunged for it, my body feeling like it was moving through molasses. The aliens, sensing my intent, moved to stop me. But they were too late. My hand closed around the lever. With the last of my strength, I pulled it down. The world went white. There was a sound like reality itself tearing in half. The visions in my mind exploded into fragments. I felt like I was being turned inside out, my very atoms screaming in protest. And then... silence. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, the bunker was dark and still. The oppressive hum that had filled the air was gone, replaced by a ringing silence. "Sophia?" I called out, my voice hoarse. No response. Stumbling to my feet, I made my way to the entrance. The door hung open, revealing a night sky filled with familiar stars. No writhing colours, no impossible geometries, just the moon and the Milky Way, as they had always been. But the forest around the bunker was changed. The trees were twisted into strange shapes, their leaves an array of colours not found in nature. The ground was covered in a fine, iridescent powder that shifted and swirled with each step. Of Sophia and the alien beings there was no sign. I walked for hours, making my way back to civilization. The world I found was changed, but still recognizably Earth. The invasion had been stopped, but not without cost. Reports trickled in of mass hallucinations, of entire towns simply vanishing, of people changed in subtle and not so subtle ways. The official story, when it came, was a masterpiece of obfuscation. A combination of solar flares, mass hysteria, and domestic terrorism, they said. Nothing to do with aliens or other dimensions, nothing that would shatter the comfortable illusions of our orderly universe. But I know the truth. I lived it. And sometimes, late at night when the stars are bright, I swear I can still hear that hum. A reminder that the barrier between worlds is thin, and that there are things out there in the dark between the stars that are waiting, always waiting for another chance to break through. I don't work for NASA anymore. I don't do much of anything, really. Just write. Try to get the word out, to make people understand the fragility of our reality and the vastness of what lies beyond. Most think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But if even one person believes, if one person looks at the night sky with the proper mix of wonder and terror, then maybe it will all have been worth it, because they're still out there, waiting, and next time we might not be so lucky.